This is a video I wanted to make for a really long time now, but I've held off because of all the negative comments that I've gotten on my other review of Magi's ending. Those kind of comments have been warding me off from making this sort of content because of how discouraged I get when I state my not so nice opinion. But I really love watching videos that go against the grain, so the script is something I've written and rewritten maybe over 20 times now, so I'm just gonna give it my best shot. Just remember, this is my opinion, and you're free to have a different one no matter how standoffish I sound. I really mean no disrespect. So I already know right off the bat that this will piss a lot of people off, so I'm just going to throw in a fast warning. If you're a Sinbad stan, maybe for your own mental health, don't watch this video, because I don't hold back. Disclaimer, Sinbad is a good character. No one is saying that he's not. I made this because I was genuinely surprised how many people got upset at me for pointing out the faults of Sinbad in the last arc of Magi. So now is the time, after covering both Magi the Labyrinth of Magic and Adventures of Sinbad, with as best of an understanding as one can have, why you have to stop putting Sinbad on a pedestal and refusing to call him a villain in the final arc. Warning! Warning! This video will have major spoilers from both Magi and Adventures of Sinbad. You have been warned. Do not watch if you don't want to know the endings of either. So I got this comment on my Magi video, and it felt like it was about damn time to address all the Sinbad stans out there who actually believe this, because it well and truly baffles me, leaving me wondering if we even read the same series. I agree with some parts of this, but saying Sinbad's development was as simple as him just losing his way, it really doesn't do his intense character development any justice. It amazes me that him wanting to wipe out the planet and everyone in it doesn't make him a bad guy. You're seriously gonna defend him on that? Do you really dislike all of the Magi characters that much you'd be fine with their untimely demises only for Sinbad to be the only one living on? By the way, the characters in the series shouting how excited they are to be born into a new world, that's a lie that Sinbad fed them. None of those people would actually be born again, they would be gone forever, and their rook would be used as energy to blast through the other alternate universes/dimensions, and that much is stated in canon. It's an extreme example, and I don't think any of the fans realistically rooted for Sinbad to get what he wanted, unless I'm right and you actually only like Sinbad. But if you can acknowledge that, you have to also acknowledge that he had terrible actions and a villain role in the story that was built up to happen throughout the entire series of Magi. If you can't acknowledge the fact that he was a villain in the last arc, your bias is showing. And if I asked anyone unfamiliar with Magi and its characters if they would support a character wiping out the whole world and everyone in it just so one character become the god of a new world and reign over it, they would probably tell you that's batshit insane. Hell, if any of the characters in any series wanted to be god like that, even Aladdin or Alibaba, I would still think that was wrong. It's kind of like if you say that, that's the sort of thing that you expect from a villain character. Like, you're not gonna root for someone whose plan is to become god of the new world and wipe out the old world. That is textbook villain. Even Solomon's will isn't really his will or under his direct control. It's destiny free-flowing, no fate established for anyone outside of the ones that they make for themselves. The Rook turns black because they reject this free-willed fate and the power that every individual has, and they resent their circumstances, which in my mind doesn't make people with Black Rook evil or even bad. It just makes them people who have endured a lot of pain due to hardships that they were subjected to involuntarily. If you look back through countless different series, you will find many villains that can be fan favorites. There are countless antagonists that people love and sympathize with, those who are misguided and unfortunate. However, most people aren't ridiculous enough to deny their label within the story they inhabit. That label can change. Sinbad's label changed from a protagonist to an antagonist because of the role he played in the story. He went from a helpful and kind character to becoming the opposition for those with free will and are protagonists. Most people can sympathize with a good number of the Magi villains, like maybe Fallon or Judar, the Wren family, and maybe even Arba, because in certain areas of the manga they played antagonistic roles that sometimes came after them being protagonists, like in the case of Arba, or from antagonists into the good guys, like what you see from Cohen. I'm not talking about the irredeemable scum, always awful like David or Lady Madar / Madara, those absolute garbage heaps that fucked over so many innocent people. Case in point, you could see a lot of build-up throughout the series leading us in the direction of Sinbad's path, and how, by the end of the story, he would fundamentally oppose all of the lessons we've learned up until this point. Magi's lesson was that the world is vast and complicated, but a beautiful place worth protecting, and that we all have a voice, value, and our freedom, with everyone bringing in their separate qualities to the table, and with cooperation and understanding, we can make the world a better place despite clear mistakes that have happened and will continue to happen since people seem to naturally conquer others in efforts to protect ones that they love. We saw that very early on in the way that Aladdin struggled when dealing with Ko's invasion of the Tenzin Plateau through the Koga clan and Hakue. We were able to see opposing people and the choices between destroying your enemies in war, peaceful surrender, or withdrawal, in order for each's attempt at world peace and unity while also trying to maintain culture and individuality. It's always been a very hard balance and will result in certain people being put into bad situations, like Dunya losing everything she loved when magicians fought back from being exploited, Cassim being born into poverty and pushed to the brink of despair with his sister's death and his father's murder, while Ali Baba was safe and sound in Balbad's palace, Judar being stolen at birth and indoctrinated into Al-Thaman and essentially deprived of the freedom to live like Magi before him, which molded him into a violent person who loves war. Examples like this prove it's not perfect. These attempts at bringing peace while still allowing people to live and thrive how they want doesn't always result in the greater good, even if there is the best of intentions. We can argue all day about what's truly best for the world, and people do that here at our own all the time. That's the beauty of Magi, seeing all these different opinions and ways of life, getting every side of the story with rarely any black and white morality. If we look at instances of our perception changing, you see that in Ko being labeled as the bad guys, when Cohen and the others all along actually had their own good intentions, resembling Sinbad in the fact that they wanted war to come to an end. Balbad, under Ko's control, makes Zanib happy because her family isn't starving or struggling anymore, but it makes Hassan upset because he longs for the freedom of the Fog Troop he once had. The magicians in Magnostat, thinking their solution was trapping the Goy underground with unlimited food, drink, and debauchery entirely free of performing any labor, was best to prevent their previous oppression, and generally not being malicious. Just needing to learn the lesson that all people are equal, and everyone should have an opportunity to better themselves no matter what abilities they are born with. The amazing thing about Magi is showing all these gray areas, that everyone has their reasons for doing the things that they do, and not many of them are truly awful people after all. But in the same breath, none of them are supremely perfect and should take control of everyone's way of life, which is what Sinbad intends to do at the end of the story. He's been shady during many sections of the manga, and we see countless times where Jafar and Sinbad reflect on his manipulative and deceitful ways. Don't get me wrong, Sinbad is a good character, and more often than not, he does impressive and helpful things. He's very well developed, extremely complex, and compelling. But a good character does not a hero make. Let's go back and talk about that comment again. So you're saying Sinbad was good because he sacrificed himself. Well, let's look at the context of that. Sure, he did end up sacrificing himself, but you're leaving out the context that led up to that point. Who was the one who actively tried to bring about the end of the world? Oh, yes, that was Sinbad. He started it, he caused the problem, he wanted to destroy the world. Let's make a quick comparison. Imagine some person planting a bomb in a large city. On his way to set it off, he runs into a few friends that try to talk him out of it. Sure, he's got another guy on the other side, David, who eggs him on and even tries to help him pull the switch. I guess in his case he actually does pull it. But that doesn't change the fact that the first guy, that's what he wanted, and acted on it, because ultimately he was the one who put everyone in danger. At the end of the day, he ends up stopping the bomb, changing his mind, saving everyone from being killed by it by giving up his own life. Does that make him a hero if he was the one who caused the danger in the first place? Do they deserve praise and thanks when they had the thought in the first place to harm others and put them into danger instead of figuring out beforehand that there were people that they could debate with that might change their perspective? To call him a hero at the end of Magi is ludicrous. And completely ridiculous when you look at the context of his supposed death, since it's implied he didn't even really die and might even come back. I understand the generals missing him because Sinbad played a major part in their lives and did so much for them. But for everyone else to treat him like a hero for what happened, they would be missing the point. By you saying, sure, he wanted to rewrite the Rook, but that doesn't make him a villain. Of course, that in particular wouldn't make him the villain. Look at Solomon. Only grief-driven Alma-Turan people and psychopathic screwjobs like Arba ever blamed Solomon for changing the Rook and destiny. And I guess Sinbad in that one panel. But look at the difference between what he did and what Sinbad did. Sinbad changed the Rook, not to free people like Solomon. Instead, he changed it so that everyone would obey him and their free will was now handed over to him. Now, instead of thinking for themselves on certain things, like choosing if their world would be destroyed was a good idea or not, they all went along with Sinbad's plan because Sinbad rewrote the Rook to change their perspective in order to benefit himself. Before I go into detail about that, let's move on to the next point. That Sinbad's gone through horrible things and that makes it okay or not as bad as it would be if he hadn't. We all know Sinbad has had to deal with awful situations and is severely traumatized. He lost his mother, he almost died multiple times, he struggled to learn how to trade and make his own company, he was forced into becoming a slave, he established a country just to have it destroyed with countless of his people killed and even his extremely close friends. No one is arguing Sinbad hasn't gone through some serious shit, but why should that be a shield for his actions? If we're going to make that argument, then how about we talk about that awful moment in Adventures of Sinbad where Sinbad stumbles upon the research area on the Parthian island where he wanted to build his country, finding the people from his old village. People he knew and cared about. The people he grew up around before he conquered his first dungeon. The people who were like a surrogate family to him. All of them were turned into monsters, experimented on, and pleading for his help. What did Sinbad do? He turned his back on them. He left them to be killed by Barbarossa's minions. He literally used their deaths as a stepping stone for his dream of making a country. Of course, you can look at the reasoning behind that. If Sinbad had helped them, Barbarossa would have cut him off and not given him the land anymore. He would have lost that alliance and potential. You could also say, what sort of life would those people have lived if they had been freed? What would they do if they looked so monstrous? Though I think about that point and I'm like, well, he took in Draken somehow. At the end of the day, you cannot deny it was so cold and terrible for him to just let them die, turning his back on them as they begged for his help. They warned him about Barbarossa's cruelty. He would later go on to ignore that warning from other people and let even more die in the name of protecting his alliance with an awful murderous dictator. If you look back on the days of him bargaining and establishing Sindri on that Parthian island, you know that he got glimpses of the monster Barbarossa was. A fascist piece of scum who labeled Sinbad's own people as inferior species, not even human. And he said that to Sinbad's face. Sinbad knew that, getting a clue from his former villagers and even from his citizens that were literally being kidnapped off the streets, taken away to be slaughtered. Sinbad was aware that people were being stolen by Parthian soldiers. All the while, Sinbad turned a blind eye. He pretended like it wasn't happening. Whether that was for the progression of his country or for the friendship he established with Barbarossa, it was fucked up. But he stayed quiet. He didn't ask any questions. He kept his head down while innocent people were lined up like animals and killed. He ignored the people from his village who helped raise him when they told him of Parthivia's horrors. He ignored when people informed him Sindria's citizens were going missing in the streets. He ignored Sarandine when she told Sinbad not to trust Barbarossa. That doesn't mean she had the right to use Sinbad for an assassination attempt, but he was given all the signs in the world not to trust and look up to that shitbag of a man. Don't get me wrong, I do not think this, or anything else in the prequel series, makes Sinbad a bad person for the mistakes that he made in Adventures of Sinbad, but it's a clear demonstration that he's not the perfect hero or simply even misguided, as some people make him out to be. If you compare him to someone like Aladdin or Ali Baba, you never see them turn a blind eye to people in need or something wrong that's going on so they can save their own skin or focus on what they're trying to do. While Sinbad says things like, "Be my Magi" to Aladdin and David, implying them as serving and supporting him, Ali Baba treats Aladdin like an equal and like he has the right to choose too. Like, it would have been more beneficial to Aladdin to ignore the fact that so many non-magicians were being segregated in Magnostad, how they were being kept underground, left in miserable positions with their Magoi being stolen from them, any sickly among them being tossed into a pit to die. He could have continued living happily with his education and had more benefit, but he didn't. He saved Marga and a whole bunch of others, and he risked expulsion from the school or even death. In comparison, Sinbad's goals have shown that, to achieve what he wants, he will do whatever it takes. Stomp on whoever is in his way, leave people in the dust if that's what it takes to get to his ultimate goal. Maybe some people look at that and see it as admirable. But when I see other protagonists, even beyond Magi, you see people like Naruto or Deku or Tanjiro, and they never turn their back on people who are in need. Though I'll admit I'm not necessarily caught up with My Hero Academia. A good parallel, I imagine, is when Edward Elric finds out that the Philosopher's Stone was made using human souls, and he was crushed by that revelation, knowing that he couldn't possibly do that to other people to achieve his goal. But from how Sinbad acted in The Adventures of Sinbad, I seriously question if he would have made the same choice. I don't see that dark and obsessive streak, at least when it comes to letting innocent people be harmed. You can only see their regrets at being unable to save people, not being unable to save them because it wasn't in their best interest. That's probably a good reason why Sinbad wasn't the main protagonist of Magi, if the very ending wasn't enough of a reason. I'll admit that point can be a little shaky because I don't know every single detail about every character, nor can I assume everything that Sinbad may or may not do. But in my head, that's what separates him from who Sinbad is in Magi, opposed to who he was in the early years of Adventures of Sinbad. In Adventures of Sinbad, you could see him feeling grief and regret, but that side of him is mostly lost when he gains more and more power in Magi. And Sinbad no Buken, or Adventures of Sinbad, showed a small premonition of what sort of person he would become in the future. This obviously doesn't mean that he only ever did things to benefit him, since he's done many charitable things in Magi, like taking in the pirate children who worked for Madara, and even neutral things like knowing Cohen was alive and not taking him out. I do not disagree with people who think that he has a good heart. I believe he does as well. He's quick to show kindness to anyone who's not his enemy, and he would never hurt anyone unless it was for a greater purpose. He didn't even kill people who deserved to die, and who hurt him beyond what a normal person should have to bear. His kindness generally has no cost, and he's generous. That's easy enough to see from the people in Syndria. But at the end of the day, he is goal-driven, and even when he brought Aladdin, Alibaba, and Morgiana back to Syndria with him, he assessed their value, as well as the value of many people he brought on board with him when he was younger, like Shah Khan, Masur, Jafar, etc. Sinbad keeps driving and driving into that goal until he stepped too far. Now I'll go back to responding to his reasoning for destroying the entire world, everything he knows, everything he helped build up and created, all for his no war mentality. No one likes war, at least no one with a real conscience. So we all know at the end of the day, that's a good goal to have, and anyone would want it. Many characters in Magi also oppose war. This idea isn't exclusive to Sinbad. The issue was, Sinbad became far too arrogant. As Hakuryu pointed out in The Sacred Place, how he didn't rely on other people and took all the burden up on himself. Hakuryu compares it to when he neglected to tell Hakuei anything because he thought that was for the best. He thought it was up to him to protect her, and only then, by sharing his burden, like when he gave the throne to Kogyoku, he was able to be more at peace. Hakuryu tells him that what you believe is right can change. That's the nature of being human. Because he views himself above everyone else, even his closest and longest time friends, they're all just pieces of his giant puzzle. What Sinbad believes is right will never be challenged, even if it's not the best path or even a good one. On the surface, his comrades seem cared for, and I'm sure Sinbad is grateful to them. But he doesn't view them as his equals. He would easily get rid of them for his ultimate goal. The last arc proved that without a shadow of a doubt. And I also wanted to mention that the parallel between Sinbad and Hakuryu is really strong because Hakuryu believed in himself so much that he went to go kill his mother. He killed her, and then he changed what he thought was right, and then he started a war against Cohen and his siblings. And when the war was over, he talked to Cohen and realized that they weren't as different as he thought they were, and he wished that he had the chance to talk to him, and it would have helped change his perspective into something better. That is something that Sinbad clearly lacks. And that's a lesson that Hakuryu learned, but Sinbad never did. Of course, there are some people in the world that might do what Sinbad was trying to do, as in turning the whole world around and changing the world order. But you have to understand that generally, most people wouldn't. And maybe that's why some of you admire Sinbad so much, because it's true that he's kind when it costs him nothing. He's an amazing person. He's done so many things. He managed to unite the entire world. But he obviously stepped too far in his ambition if it will lead to the annihilation of the world. All for his supposed conquering of other universes and gods. When you think about it too much, you also realize there was a lot of arrogance, because he aims to go after these gods that are supposedly out there and dominating the world of Magi. Like it showed Ugo was able to put Il-Isla in like its own little constellation where he was watching over it. And Sinbad thought by breaking the walls, he could somehow beat those gods that are above his universe, when realistically he has no idea how strong they are or what they're even like. He's just ready to destroy other worlds because he's Sinbad. Apparently, he knows best. He's chosen by destiny. Sinbad already started developing this god complex. It makes sense in certain degrees because he's the singularity and beloved by destiny, able to navigate the flow of fate better than anyone else in the world. He has an impressive resume from a successful trading company, turned country, turned countless countries at his beck and call, turned global unity under his command. He's an impressive guy, but Aladdin makes a point. He did all that. He's amazing, but he's still human and he still makes mistakes. What right does he have to rule over every person that's ever been born and ever will be born in his newly created world and control their fates? Are we forgetting about the people of Amatoran? How they all sank into despair, realizing that everything they've done and everything that they will do is all under destiny's umbrella? All out of their hands? Nothing is their choice to make? They have no power over their own destiny. That's why Solomon changed the Rook in the first place and separated the dimension, to give people that freedom back and the power over their own fate. Sinbad essentially wanted to take that power away, to claim that he has the right to do that, to take every life and to change people's mind, to bend to his particular set of values. It's unbelievable to me how people actually thought that was just innocent, misguided idea. Ending the world of Magi as we know it. All those amazing characters gone. Every future generation in his new world, all under the steady influence of Sinbad and Sinbad alone. And we cannot discount how messed up the brainwashing actually is. If we look back after when Aladdin first said the world has changed, we instantly see Kogyoku doubting herself and leaving the alliance, which is tame. But then we witness Alibaba and Morgiana fight. She shouts, "Why do you keep challenging Sinbad? Everyone longed for a peaceful and prosperous communities." When we can't pretend that it makes actual sense, considering she was literally on the run from Sinbad for years. His influence over everyone after the Rook change is so absolute. We even see Komei talk about, just like Sinbad, how they established a new trade zone. It'll be fine now, but, it doesn't really matter because it won't protect the far future after their deaths. Everyone is talking just how Sinbad wants, blabbing on about, we have to focus about what happens in 1,000 years, or we need one king to keep the peace. Kakobone says Sinbad is a master strategist, and everyone absolutely dotes over him as their forever leader. Sinbad says it's as simple, I just changed their hope, but their hope is a major part of their life. It's practically their identities. These people would have never considered that before, would have never said things about 1,000 years. Mu even says, I don't know why this thing I thought was so important to me was ever important at all. And Shah Khan went from his first exchange with Alibaba post-time skip about how he loved Heliohapt but missed the old Sindria and didn't understand why Sinbad wanted to get rid of countries, then to saying, 1,000 years from now is just as important, and they shouldn't focus on trivial things like people and countries and current times. Even Jafar turns from reminding Sinbad that he's human and to just celebrate what he's accomplished instead of worrying about what will happen once they're all dead, to, it's to create a peaceful world forever, that's what's important. Their values have changed drastically, and that's goddamn terrifying. They barely even have their own unique thoughts anymore. And of course that won't happen if you're only focused about what's going to happen 1,000 years from now. All of the people of Magi became a collective. They all ignore their current situations, their own countries, the customs and cultures that they have built over thousands of years. They are forced into focusing on what will be a distant future that they won't even be a part of. He practically zombified them. Even if Sinbad hadn't decided on recreating the world and had just stuck around in the old one, how terrifying is it that he could fundamentally change everyone's collective conscience with a drop of a hat? That he could make them do anything that he wanted? And I'm sure people can say, oh, but Sinbad wouldn't abuse that power. He's just too kind. He just wants peace. But would he? Would he really never abuse it? He abused it pretty well when it came to when he thought he would lose power over Barbarossa and Parthevia, and to maintain it, he sacrificed the lives of his former fellow villagers, ignoring the mass killings of his own people in the First Kingdom of Sindria in order to stay in the good graces with a fascist leader. How, when he prioritized killing said leader rather than saving his own people from an army and assassins. How he tried to trap Aladdin when he was 10 years old because he wanted his own Magi. When he threatened countries like Sasa, Artemia, and Heliohapt. When he used literal children to start a slave rebellion knowing many of them would be killed. When he treated Kogyoku as a tool by manipulating her love for him and making her feel like a traitor for years. He used Hakuryu as a means to control the Ko Empire. How he dethroned all of the Seven Seas Alliance country leaders and replaced them with his loyal generals. How he let Arba continue possessing Hakue, allied with that bitch who had caused so much suffering and death in the world. How he would have let Arba kill Aladdin's friends and maim him terribly, or maybe just end up killing him too. How he put Ko into an economic collapse with his new rules that they weren't used to, keeping them in debt to gain control of the country. And when Alibaba shows up for a solution for them to be able to thrive again, Sinbad squashes it in his attempt to down him all for his control. Their happiness and prosperity be damned when he bullies any country like that wouldn't join his alliance. My point in bringing this up isn't actually to dog on Sinbad. It's not to say all of his mistakes make him a bad person or weigh down his good deeds with his bad. It's just pointing out that he isn't perfect. He isn't above hurting and using people. He's not worthy of ruling over the entire world's conscience and forcing them all to conform to his values and thoughts. And the fact that he actively tried to do it was villainous, to say the least. You cannot downgrade it and say it's not villainous, it's just misguided, whatever bullshit. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. Because let's face it, Sinbad doesn't mind causing pain to others or throwing away their best personal interests. He cares for his own values, and he masks them as righteous for his glorious ambition of world peace now and forever, which is really just himself as the light and hope of everyone. They all believe in that same light, but he takes away their right to reject being able to fight for what they want and what they believe in. So do not call Sinbad only a creator of peace with good intentions. He's the one who would be benefiting from all of this forever. He would never die. He would always call the shots. But if he could sleep at night, if God sleep, knowing that all these new people in his new world would never endure war and tragedies like the old one, just, it's their freedom and ambition. Who cares about that? That would be good. Whatever, but it's worth, right? Maybe I'm just an angry individualist, and sure, there are conspiracy theories out there that say we're all being controlled anyway, but look at the state of our world. It truly sucks sometimes, and it makes my stomach sink when I think about all these awful things like violence, starvation, and greed that destroys the planet, and so much more. But if you asked me, if you said that some really impressive person in our world wanted to destroy me and everything else I knew, to start all over and make it so all these bad things went away, maybe I'm a selfish bitch, but I'd still say hell no. No way I'm giving up on my life. Sometimes my life really sucks, and there are moments where I don't want to be around, but it's still mine, my future, and there are things that I want to do and be. And I have a hope of making things better, and I will work for that, and I will not let it be taken away from me, even if it's for everything being perfect later. Some of the countries, like Ko and Reem, show that independent spirit that people still have, how they can relish in building themselves up with their own hands, even if it's hard. Sometimes they make so many mistakes they'll have to overcome their bloody past and how people don't trust them. But taking pride in their culture and achievements, they would still try to do it. They still wanted to do that. Sinbad was visibly shaken and upset by them saying that, not trusting them and not trusting the future that he could not be a part of for all eternity. Sinbad lived in fear of that war that would happen once he died. But are you forgetting about Jafar's words of wisdom before he brainwashed everyone? When Sinbad talked about 100 or 1,000 years from now, Jafar said to him, "Gazing so far into the future is foolish. Let people in that time deal with it because people will rise up to fix it just as we did. That is the future. It's not their concern. They can only do the best with what time they have, and they can set roots for the future. Because that's the cycle of life. We all live and we all die. We all face unfortunate accidents and tragedies that feel like they have no meaning. That's just how it is. Like a tree can't live forever. It can't stop itself from being cut down, or an animal from burrowing into it, or disease from destroying it. You can only do the best with what time you have. Sad or unfair as it can be sometimes. Sinbad's mistakes were openly called out by characters in the series too. So many times in the Sindria arc, we see Jafar pointing out Sinbad's being shady and manipulative, how he's changed, and his optimistic view of the world has vanished in favor of plotting and pushing forward to reach his goals. You see many instances of Sinbad twisting things to put people into positions that are in his favor. And though I've already pointed out many straightforward instances of that, in small cases, how he backhandedly tried to pressure Aladdin into being Sindria's Magi, thinking he would fold because he's a starry-eyed child who's new to the world, or when he met the world leaders at the summit and tried to make Ko out to be controlled by Al-Thaman, so every country would consider them their enemy and not trust them, even though Kohen had nothing to do with Arba and he didn't take orders from her. We even get an obvious foreshadowing moment when Mogammet, the Chancellor of the Academy, after he's realized his mistakes in the midst of his transformation into the medium, which would have summoned Il-Ila during the Magno-Stot War, he directly says, "No man, no matter how excellent they are, should rule above everyone." After which, the next/largest panel that is shown is Sinbad's face. It's very direct foreshadowing what happens in the future and how that's a lesson that Sinbad hasn't grasped. And because of that, he takes so many steps into becoming the villain and doing these bad things that need to be stopped by the protagonists. His arrogance attempts to be quelled by the whole, "I brought you here as my candidates. If you're better than me, you can be God," letting us think that he's hesitating, and in some cases he might be, but when we see Aladdin face off against him in Dungeon Zepar, we see that he really does view himself as high and mighty, how others will die and join the great flow or just cease to exist, but how he is chosen by some higher god than apparently one of this world, like he was raised as divine all along. And the moment Ali Baba pins him down on something, Sinbad realizes he's being influenced and gets defensive. And though it's good that Sinbad did change his mind and wanted to do the whole communicate with other universes tactic, it was still his fault that he took control and set in motion a plan to end the world when he could have just tried talking about it with everyone in the first place. Even Sinbad acknowledges that him living on in the world would hold people back, and his death or departure would teach a lesson to everyone that choosing one king to rule above everyone is wrong. Even he saw more of a fault with his actions than some of the people in my comments section. He did change many times throughout Adventures of Sinbad. The Sinbad we saw at the start of the series would have never let his villagers die, friendship or not, monsters or not. He had that innocence and desire to protect life that even had him save Dragul in Dungeon Bayal, despite him being an enemy and a rival who had potential to claim a metal vessel rather than him. The Sinbad who first created Sindria on the island in the southern seas would have never plotted to mind control everyone. He would have just been happy that all the countries of the world were allied with him to stop wars in the world during his lifetime. Each step Sinbad took, he wanted more and more until it was too much. No one will call you stupid for liking Sinbad. No one will think that he's not a legend, because he is. But he's not a god, and he doesn't deserve to be a god and control everyone. That was just what we were saying. No one should do that. And that's the point. That's why I was frustrated in Magi, how everyone just forgot about his mistakes and didn't hold him accountable, giving him the death cop-out instead of returning to make things right. Even though he said that he thought that he should leave, I still think that's bullshit, and I think that it would have been more beneficial to everyone if he had returned and lived to atone for what he did. But some people thought he didn't even need to atone for what he did, and that's just what frustrated me into making this video. I'm not even saying that Sinbad was an overall negative on the story, since thankfully no one ended up dying, well, at least no one important, because a few people did end up turning into pure Rook. And Ugo was actually freed from being stuck in the sacred place forever. Plus, Arba can finally chill the hell out about Isla, but his actions took on a villain role, and typically villains of the story don't get what they originally set out to do anyhow, so it all turned out okay. You can give credit to Sinbad for helping turn that ending into a good one, sure, but you also have to admit he fucked up the piece in the first place, and in my head, no one world is better than the other. If you compare the one before the sacred place was destroyed or the one after it, it's still the same people. There's just no Sinbad in the latter, and everything is just like a little bit weirder, and I guess you can see the red lions now. Sinbad was the villain of the last arc. That's why he had to be stopped, and that's why I'm glad he changed his mind and protected the people in the world of Magi last minute. So please stop saying that he's selfless, who only had good intent. Because Misguided doesn't even begin to cover up the massive ego you need to decide that your life is more important than everyone else's, regardless of the whole peace forever shtick, which so many characters in the series also wanted, but didn't have to be that demented to want to brainwash the entire world to do it. All of this David aside, because I hate stupid fucking David and his popping in and out of control on a dime. I wish he'd just been eliminated in Almataran all those years ago to despise this, all the convoluted bullshit. But if we must talk about David for a moment, when him and Sinbad reach the sacred place, they are brought down by Ugo. If you want to claim that all of Sinbad's wrongdoings are David's fault and influence, you're forgetting that Sinbad was the one who helped David escape from the prison that Ugo put him in. He actually says to him, "Support me as your king. You are needed." You could say, oh, Sinbad just said that because he needed David to take him out of the great flow so he could get control of the sacred place. But that just makes it even more weirdly manipulative, and in terms of their character, at least you have to say they have equal part to blame in their actions, because David did influence him by being a creepy voice in his head for years, though Sinbad clarified over and over again that his thoughts were his own. They both mutually helped each other, but it was Sinbad who, from the start, led the way, proclaiming David as his Magi, saying he would use them, which he's taken on a supporting role to their king. That's just what Magis tend to do, like Judar and Hakuryu, Aladdin and Alibaba. And even when David tries to reject that and things don't go exactly the way he envisioned them and he freaks out and tries to go his own way, it's still always a fight for control that Sinbad always seems to get the upper hand on. At the end of the day, Sinbad changed his mind. But that was because of Alibaba and the others' help. Because of him, some people did lose their lives from the creepy angels that were turned into pure Rook. A lot of villains have character arcs and turn into protagonists, which ended up happening to Sinbad as well. Through his villainy, it was very much a slow burn. I was happy for the change of heart, since without that, perhaps everyone would have died anyway. But he still started the storm. He still lit the fire. He still needed to be stopped and changed. He didn't initiate that change himself. I mean, sure, he didn't smite them in the sacred place, but if they had never gone to the sacred place, he would have just carried it out anyway. So I'm sorry, I don't want to hand him a hero sticker for doing the bare minimum right choice of not ignoring the sensible people in front of you and giving you a better option and opening your mind to a different solution. And the fact he didn't actually do it out of moral obligation or feeling bad that maybe killing everyone and starting new with everything under his control now forever would be a cruel thing to do. Oh, that's not the... Nope. Okay. Okay, then. This video got extremely philosophical, and I know at the end of the day, not everyone will agree, but I couldn't help but be annoyed at people who actually justified all of what Sinbad did, and saw him as innocent and good through all of it. I'm one of those kinds of people who always try to see the good in everyone. If you find that dumb or not, so clearly I sympathize with Aladdin and Alibaba trying to maintain the freedom of people before their whole dimension talk that confused the shit out of me. So it did frustrate me to see so many people angry that I was harsh on Sinbad for his mistakes. So my point, ultimately, is you can like Sinbad. You can love him. You can say he's an amazing character and a favorite because I like him too. I think his story is very well done and the characterization is far more advanced than others in the series of Magi. But don't pretend like he's the selfless peacekeeper who only wanted to make the world a better place forever. Own up to it that he ended up a villain in the last arc, that he changed his mind, and that's good, but he fucked up in a big way towards the end of Magi. And take it from his own mouth how he messed up. Thank you so much for watching if you made it up to this point. I should probably stop this Magi gravy train because I've just about run it all the way down the road to its last stop, and I really don't have anything else to say on it, so I will be moving on to different video topics. Let me know if there's any that you would like me to cover, and hopefully I'll see you in my next random video.